What happens when a royal guest walks onto a talk show stage believing she's untouchable, only to meet a host who refuses to bow? In just 38 seconds, one question would spark a firestorm, leaving viewers stunned, a host vindicated, and a royal storming off in fury. The studio lights blazed hot that morning. Cameras rolled. Behind his desk, Piers Morgan sat with that unmistakable look of cool confidence, the kind of composure that comes from having faced presidents, criminals, and movie stars alike. Nothing rattled him. He thrived on tension, and today he could sense it in the air. Meghan Markle walked onto the set with quiet poise and visible authority. Designer outfit flawless, posture regal, smile rehearsed. The audience clapped politely as she crossed her legs, settling in as though she owned the room. "Welcome to the show," Piers began, voice warm but professional. "Happy to be here," Meghan replied, though her tone carried the faint suggestion that she was doing him a favor. Piers leaned forward, pen tapping lightly against his notes. "Let's dive right in, shall we? You've spoken often about privacy, about how the press invaded your life. Yet here you are doing another interview. Some might call that contradictory. How do you see it?" The smile on Meghan's face faltered just slightly. "Well, Piers," she began carefully, "there's a difference between sharing your truth and having lies spread about you." "Your truth," Piers repeated, tilting his head. "Interesting phrase. Does that mean there are multiple truths? Because usually there's just the truth, not a version you get to edit." Meghan shifted in her seat. "You're twisting my words." "I'm simply asking for clarity," Piers said evenly. "You've made serious claims. About racism, about being silenced, about neglect. Heavy accusations. But when people ask for details, you tend to speak in broad strokes. Can you see why some might be skeptical?" Meghan's tone sharpened. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm asking for evidence," Piers replied calmly. "That's what journalists do. We don't seek your truth or my truth. We seek the truth." Meghan laughed. "But it was tight, humorless. This is exactly the problem. People like you, sitting in your comfortable chair, thinking you can question what I went through. You have no idea what it's like to live my life." "You're right," Piers nodded. "I've never been royal, but I've interviewed people who've endured far worse, and they still manage to answer questions directly. I'm not attacking you. I'm asking you to explain." "I don't need to explain myself," Meghan shot back. "I lived it. You didn't." Piers didn't blink. "If you go on television making accusations that damage people and institutions, then yes, you do need to explain yourself. That's accountability. You can't throw grenades and then hide when someone asks for proof." The studio fell silent. The tension was electric. "You've had it out for me from the beginning," Meghan said, leaning forward. "You're bitter because I stopped responding to your messages. This is personal." Piers actually laughed. "You think I'm asking these questions because you stopped texting me? That's quite a story. But no, this isn't about me. It's about your claims and your unwillingness to back them up." "I don't need to back up anything," she snapped. "My experience is real. My pain is real. And if you can't see that, you're part of the problem." "Your experience may be real to you," Piers said softly, his tone steady as stone. "But when you accuse others, an entire family, an entire institution, your feelings alone aren't enough. You need facts. Otherwise it's opinion. And opinions aren't truth. That was the breaking point." Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "I don't have to sit here and be interrogated like a criminal." "You're not being interrogated," Piers replied, unmoved. "You agreed to come here. You knew how I conduct interviews. If you only want soft questions and praise, there are plenty of shows that will give you that. This isn't one of them." "You're a bully," Meghan said, voice trembling with anger. "A misogynist who can't handle a strong woman speaking her mind." Piers raised an eyebrow. I've interviewed strong women all my life. Thatcher, Madonna, Hillary Clinton, Judi Dench. They didn't crumble. They didn't call me names. They answered the questions. The audience held its breath. Cameras kept rolling, and for a moment no one moved. They defended their positions with facts and logic. Piers said evenly, "You're calling me names because you've run out of answers." "How dare you compare me to them?" Meghan snapped. "You're right," Piers replied after a brief pause, his tone softening. "I apologize. That was unfair of me. Those women earned their reputations through years of actual work and achievement." He leaned forward slightly. "You, on the other hand, married into fame." A sharp gasp rippled through the audience. Meghan's face flushed crimson. "You know what?" she said, her voice tight, trembling with rage. "I gave up everything. My career, my family, my country. I left it all behind." "You didn't give it up," Piers countered, his calm veneer beginning to crack just slightly. "You traded it. You wanted the crown without the weight that comes with it. You wanted the fairy tale. And when it turned out to have rules and responsibilities, you walked away. That's not sacrifice. That's choice. And now you call it suffering." "I was being destroyed," Meghan fired back. "The press was destroying me." "The press asked questions," Piers said, his voice firm now. "That's what we do. If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't have married into the most famous family on Earth. Did you think it was going to be all tiaras and tea parties? Every royal faces criticism. Every single one. But you think you should be exempt. Why? Because of my race." Meghan shot back, jabbing a finger toward him. "You and people like you treat me differently because of it." Piers shook his head slowly. "Don't do that. Don't hide behind it. Don't cheapen real racism by using it as a shield. I've criticized plenty of royals. White royals. Andrew, Charles, even the Queen when I thought she was wrong. Being criticized isn't racism. Being asked for proof isn't racism. Using that word as armor every time someone challenges you. That's what's insulting." Meghan was trembling now, fury and disbelief in her eyes. "You don't get to tell me what racism is. And you don't get to throw that accusation around without proof," Piers shot back. "You claimed someone in the royal family made a racist comment about your son. Who was it? What did they say? When did it happen? Those are basic questions. But you refuse to answer. You let the public speculate. Let them destroy whoever they imagine it might be. That's not courage, Meghan. That's cowardice." "I don't have to tell you anything," she said, her voice shaking. "Then don't make the claim," Piers replied, cool and final. "You can't have it both ways. You can't say you were silenced while sitting on Oprah's couch being watched by millions. You can't demand privacy while signing deals with Netflix and Spotify. And you can't accuse people of racism and then refuse to say who or what or when. Adults own their words. They don't run from them." Meghan snatched her purse from beside her chair. "I'm done here." "Of course you are," Piers said quietly. "Because when someone finally pushes back, when someone asks you to defend what you've said, you run." "You play the victim. I am not playing victim," Meghan shouted. "I am a victim." "Of what?" Piers asked, spreading his hands. "Of being rich, famous? A duchess with a mansion, a husband, a platform, millions of dollars, and the world's sympathy. Please, tell me again how oppressed you are." "You're disgusting," Meghan said, her voice dripping with venom. "You're a bitter small man who tears people down to feel powerful." Piers didn't even blink. "I ask questions that need to be asked. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine." "You ambushed me," Meghan said. "You lured me here under false pretenses." "I invited you here for an interview," Piers replied evenly. "That's what this is. Questions. Conversation. If you thought you were coming to deliver a monologue while I smiled and applauded, you misjudged me. That's not what I do." "You're not a journalist," Meghan sneered. "You're a tabloid hack who got lucky." Piers allowed himself the faintest smile. "And yet here you are, on my show, because no matter what you say, you need the spotlight more than it needs you. You need the attention, the validation, the clicks. That's why you keep doing this? Because the moment people stop looking at you, you vanish." Meghan's hand shook as she pointed at him. "You're going to regret this." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," she hissed. "I have friends. I have influence. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Piers leaned back, completely composed. "Ah," he said softly. "Now we see the real you, not the victim, not the humanitarian, the one who threatens when she doesn't get her way." "Go to hell!" Meghan spat. "Not very Duchess-like language," Piers observed quietly. Meghan turned sharply toward the exit. The cameras caught every step of her departure. The flash of anger, the stony silence of the crew, the way the applause light never came on. Piers stayed seated beneath the blazing lights, pen resting on his notes. He exhaled once, calm and steady. "Well," he said finally, looking toward the audience. "That was illuminating. Piers, what would the Queen say?" Meghan turned to walk off the set, her heels striking sharply against the studio floor. But Piers wasn't finished. "Before you go," he called out, voice slicing through the silence, "let me ask you one more question." She paused. "If everything you've said is true, if you were really treated that badly, if you truly faced all that cruelty, racism, and horror, why wait years to say something? Why only after you left? After the book deals, the documentaries, the money? Why not speak up when it was happening?" Meghan spun around, fury flashing in her eyes. "Because I was scared." "Scared of what?" Piers pressed. "You're telling me you, a grown woman, a successful actress, someone who had her own career before all this, were too scared to speak up? But now that you're safe in your California mansion, with Netflix deals and celebrity friends, now you're brave enough? Convenient timing, don't you think? You don't know anything about me." Meghan shot back, her voice trembling. "I know enough," Piers said coolly. "I know you thought royal life would be glamour and red carpets, and instead you found out it's duty and work. I know you didn't like being second to Kate. I know you hated following rules, hated that the institution didn't bend for you. And when it didn't, you ran. And now you're trying to burn it all down on your way out." "That's not true," Meghan said weakly. "Then why are you still here?" Piers asked. "You said you were done. You said you were leaving. But you're still standing there. You know why? Because part of you knows I'm right. Part of you knows this hit a nerve. Because it's true." Her eyes filled with tears, more rage than sorrow. "You haven't heard the last of me." "I'm sure I haven't," Piers replied, almost smirking. "You'll go to Twitter or Instagram or whatever platform you use now and say how awful this was, how you were attacked, how you were victimized. Again, you'll probably call me sexist, racist, or whatever else you think gets sympathy. And your fans will believe you. They always do. But the people watching this, the ones who just saw what happened, they'll know the truth. They'll know I asked fair questions and you couldn't answer them. They'll know you walked out when things got tough. And they'll draw their own conclusions." Meghan's voice dropped, quiet but steady. "I hope you're proud of yourself." "I am," Piers said without hesitation. "I'm proud I did my job. Proud I didn't handle you with kid gloves just because of who you married. Proud that I asked what others are too scared or too starstruck to ask. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. And I'm not stopping because it hurts your feelings." Meghan looked at him for a long moment. For a second, it seemed she might say something else. Then she simply shook her head and walked off the set without another word. The studio fell silent. The crew froze, cameras still rolling, capturing every second. Piers watched her go, expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the camera. "Well," he said, voice calm, deliberate. "I think that went about as well as could be expected." He shuffled his papers. This is what happens when someone's used to everyone agreeing with them, used to being told how wonderful they are. And suddenly, someone doesn't play along. They can't handle it. They fall apart. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the lens. "Some of you watching probably think I was too hard on her, that I'm cruel for making her cry or walk off. But ask yourselves this. If a politician came on this show and made wild accusations without proof, would you want me to just nod along? If a CEO made claims that hurt people's reputations, would you expect me to stay quiet? Of course not. You'd expect me to push back. That's my job." He paused. "But because she's Meghan Markle, because she's married to a prince, because she's got a good sob story, some people think she should be above questioning, that asking her to back up her words is somehow an attack." He shook his head. "I disagree. Everyone should be held to the same standard. If you're going to make accusations, you should be ready to defend them. And if you can't defend them, maybe you shouldn't make them in the first place." Piers leaned back in his chair. "Look," he said, his tone softening slightly. "I don't doubt royal life was hard. There's pressure, scrutiny, endless protocol. It's not easy." "I get that," he exhaled slowly, eyes flicking toward the empty seat across from him. "But that doesn't mean you get to rewrite the story just because it suits you now." The screen faded to black. "But millions of people have hard lives," Piers went on, voice steady but sharp. "Millions face real discrimination, real hardship, real struggle. And they don't get to go on Oprah. They don't get multi-million-dollar Netflix deals. They don't get to live in mansions and complain about how unfair life has been." He leaned back in his chair, letting the silence hang. "So yes, I asked her tough questions. Yes, I challenged her narrative. And yes, she couldn't handle it. But that's not my fault. That's hers. She could have stayed. She could have defended herself. She could have answered. Instead, she walked away. And that tells you everything you need to know." The camera lingered on his face. A flicker of satisfaction passed through his eyes before the faintest smirk appeared. "We'll be right back after this break," he said coolly. "Don't go anywhere." The lights dimmed as the feed cut to commercial. Behind the scenes, chaos. Producers whispering urgently into headsets. Camera operators trading stunned glances. Every crew member replaying the moment in their minds. The walkout. The silence. The way the air shifted. But Piers sat there, calm as stone. He'd done what he came to do. He'd asked the questions everyone else was too afraid to say out loud. He'd held someone powerful accountable. And when she cracked under the pressure, she proved his point. A makeup artist hurried over to touch up his face. "That was intense," she murmured. Piers just gave a faint shrug. "That," he said, "was journalism." When the cameras came back on, his composure was absolute. "Before we continue," he said, facing the lens squarely, "I want to make one thing clear. What you just witnessed was not an ambush. It was not an attack. Meghan Markle agreed to come on this show. She knew exactly who I was, what I do, and the kind of questions I ask. She could have declined. She could have set boundaries. She could have done 100 different things. But she chose to sit in that chair, and when things got uncomfortable, she chose to leave. Those were her choices." He paused deliberately, letting the words settle. "Now," he continued, "I'm sure her team will spin this. They'll say I was unfair, that I was cruel, that I had an agenda. But you were here. You saw it. You heard every question I asked. Were they tough? Absolutely. Were they unfair? No, there's a difference." He looked down at his notes for a beat, then back up. "You know what the real issue is? We've created a culture where certain people are untouchable, where, if you have the right narrative, if you say the right words, if you position yourself as the victim, you become immune to scrutiny. That's dangerous. That's how reputations are destroyed without evidence. That's how the truth gets buried under emotion. And I refuse to play that game. He tapped his pen once against the desk, a rhythmic punctuation to his conviction. Meghan Markle wants to be taken seriously, he said. She wants to be seen as a voice for justice, for equality, for change. Fine. Then she has to withstand scrutiny. She has to answer hard questions. She has to defend what she says. If she can't do that, then she's just another celebrity with a platform, and nothing real to say. The studio was silent again. Even the audience seemed frozen, eyes fixed on him. Love him or hate him, Piers Morgan knew how to own a moment. I've been doing this for 30 years, he said, his tone softening just slightly, like a veteran, reminding the world of his credentials. I've interviewed murderers, terrorists, presidents, prime ministers, royalty. And do you know what I've learned? He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. The people telling the truth don't run from questions. They welcome them. They want to be understood. They want to explain their side. It's only the ones who can't, or won't, who shut down and storm off. He let that hang for a long, deliberate moment. So what does that tell you? He asked quietly. About what happened here today. Then came the smile, that same self-assured grin from the start of the show. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. I think the evidence speaks for itself. He straightened his papers, smooth as ever. Now, he said briskly, shifting tone. We've got a lot more ahead. Coming up next, we're talking cancel culture, and whether we've gone too far. After that, we'll dive into the latest political developments. And then, I'll take your calls. I imagine you've all got plenty to say about what just happened. He looked directly into the camera one last time. This, he said firmly, is why I do this job. Not to make friends, not to make people comfortable, but to ask the questions that need asking, to hold the powerful accountable, to get to the truth, even when that truth hurts. And I'm not going to apologize for that, Piers said, voice unwavering. Not now, not ever. The show rolled on, but everyone knew what the real story was. Everyone in the control room, everyone watching from home. They all knew what tomorrow's headline would be. The moment Meghan Markle walked off set, the moment she couldn't take the heat, the moment Piers Morgan once again went where no one else dared. In the control booth, the director was already stitching together the footage, the confrontation, the accusations, the exit, knowing it would flood every feed within hours. It was television lightning in a bottle. Back on set, Piers carried on as if nothing had happened. Segment to segment, story to story, his tone steady, his posture composed. Because to him this wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about truth. It was about asking the questions others were too afraid to ask, no matter who sat in the chair across from him. As the show neared its end, Piers gave his closing thoughts, his tone calm, deliberate, almost reflective. Thank you for watching today, he said. I know it was a bit more dramatic than usual. But that's what happens when you commit to honest journalism. You can't control how people react to being questioned. You can only control whether you ask the questions in the first place. And I'll always choose to ask. He rose from behind his desk as the credits began to roll. Join us tomorrow. Same time, same place, he said with the faintest glint of satisfaction. Who knows what will happen then? The cameras cut. The lights dimmed. The crew began to scatter, voices low, the air still heavy with what had just unfolded. But the moment wasn't over. Not really. Within hours, the clip would explode online. The walkout, the stare, the silence. Millions would watch. Millions more would argue. Some would call Piers a hero, others a villain. But everyone would be talking about it, because he had done what he always did. He had asked the questions no one else would ask. He had refused to treat anyone differently because of a title or a tear. He had held the line, And when Meghan Markle couldn't answer, when she couldn't defend herself, when the conversation turned to deflection and finally retreat, she proved his point better than he ever could have himself. The interview was over, but the conversation had only just begun. And Piers Morgan, love him or hate him, had once again reminded the world why he remained one of television's most compelling, controversial, and unflinching interviewers. He hadn't backed down. He hadn't apologized. He hadn't softened his edge. He had simply done his job. And sometimes that's all it takes to reveal the truth.